Welcome back to Good Morning LaLa. I am so excited to welcome this show, Tanya Acker. Thank you so much for being here.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely loving Hot Bench. It is hot in here, and in the show itself, it's actually even hotter.
It's brilliant.
Is our show hotter than LA is these days?
Yeah. I would say it gives it a run for its money.
Thank you for that. We're having fun. We're having a lot of fun. It's we're now shooting our 5th season, so it's the people like it. I like to think that in addition to entertaining people, we do try to give people a little tidbit of legal knowledge. You know, right? It's nice when there's a takeaway from the show. We're also doing something that I think is important because all of our cases are real cases. They're from small claims courts all around the country. And so the people who come on our show are actually able to get out of that really long line because courts are crowded, and we can get them sort of a quicker bite at the justice apple.
So it was created by Judge Judy, who we all know, who's been on television forever, and I mean, she's just amazing. And so you guys have a panel, right? So there's how many of you on the panel?
There are 3 of us. So Judy came up with the idea for the show when she was traveling, and she saw a 3-judge panel in Europe. And in Europe, unlike here, it's not uncommon to have a case tried in the first instance by 3 judges. Normally in the States, you only get 3 judges on appeal. And so she saw this idea. I mean, she saw this tribunal, and she's like, "I want to make that a show." So here we all are. My 2 colleagues are 2. I'm a lawyer. I didn't sit as a judge before being on the show. I sat like as a temporary judge in traffic court. But my 2 colleagues, Michael Corriero and Patricia Domingo, are both from New York, both sat on the bench for decades. So it's really, the 3 of us, we've got very different perspectives, we've got different backgrounds, and I think the consequence of pulling all that together is we're able to give viewers something new and different.
I'm wondering how sitting on the bench has been different to you rather than being on the other side.
So different. It is so, it really was a very steep learning curve because there are a lot, temperamentally and in terms of your approach to a problem, it's very different when you're the one who's resolving it as opposed to being the one who's like fighting for it, right? Like I'm used to being an advocate. And so for me, it was quite a learning curve because on the one hand, I'm like, okay, I'm here to solve the problem. But on the other hand, I'm like, you guys are acting crazy. You're not supposed to act like this in court. You don't do this in court. Whereas like my 2 colleagues who are used to seeing people act out in court under much worse circumstances are like, I'll be all right. Like, give them a break sometimes.
But it's on TV, so let's face the fact. They're going to dramatize it more than they would if it was a traditional court scene, right?
You would think that, right? You would think that, but no, really. I mean, we don't tell people, like, it's not a scripted show. We get a complaint and an answer. The first time they show up in front of me is the first time I've met them. I've seen their papers in advance, so I know the problem. And it would surprise you the extent to which people, knowing they're on TV, knowing everybody's seeing, how this thing is working out, they are still really, really riled up. I mean, you would think sometimes that the camera would take things down, but it doesn't. It can also build it up, but sometimes it really just gives you a glimpse of what's there.
Interesting.
It's just a glimpse of what's there.
Has surprised you most about doing the show and sort of being on that side, or?
Yeah, I think one of the things that surprises me is, well, a couple of things, frankly, have surprised me. I mean, I've been a lawyer for some time, so I've seen people fight over really nasty, tricky things. So it's not the depth of the fighting that surprises me. But what I will say, and you have to remember that our case, they're small claims litigants, right? These are people who are not represented. I'm sometimes surprised by the extent to which people think they can just win a lawsuit with a smile and good looks and no evidence.
I mean,
right?
that's how I get out of my speeding ticket.
If you look like you, then maybe you don't get tickets. But no, seriously, sometimes people, they're kind of like, well, how are you going to prove this thing to me? And they're like, well, because I said it. I'm like, well, that's not really, we're not hanging out on the sofa just having a chat. We're trying to resolve a real problem. And in order to do that, you've got to have some evidentiary basis. So sometimes I'm a little surprised that people just think that, like, fighting, proving a fact doesn't really matter.
Right. So we're talking about success today, Monday motivation and that. And look at you. I mean, you're drop dead gorgeous.
You're sweet.
So intelligent. It looks like you're married. You obviously are you have a lot of success. What would you say is the secret?
Oh
to
my
success?
gosh. That is really, I was thinking about that question as I've been listening to your program today. For me, it really is about direction. Like sometimes I just have to sit still and figure out what is going to be the next thing. You can't be successful in anything, I think, until you focus and kind of direct your energy toward a goal, right? Sometimes we're just kind of floundering. I'm not talking about other people, like sometimes it's me, right? You can just get caught up in the day and the routine of the day, and you're putting you sort of get used to doing your thing. And sometimes when you're not spending as much time focusing on why you're doing it, it just becomes this rhythm, this routine. I think that real success is about knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it, and then just trying to stay focused on it. Right. And that's hard.
It's incredible that you say that, because I sort of heard you say in your experience sort of with the show and everything like that, one of the things that surprised you most was, almost if I would have put words in your mouth, is that people seem less able to think in strategic ways than you might expect.
Yeah.
And they're less focused in that way. And so have you found that? Have you found that over the course of your career, and then coming on to that sort of being in front of the camera, that people are more challenged by the ability to think strategically and be intentional and be focused than ever before?
I think you just really hit the nail on the head. I mean, in terms of a lot of things. First off, I think strategic thinking is something that people often attribute to lawyers, right? Because they think of us like, you bring me a problem and I've got to put together your case and figure out how to solve it. But it's much bigger than that, right? Like if you're thinking about the strategy of how to think about your life, right? Everything is a strategy. There's there's strategic thinking in terms of how am I going to get through this week, getting done completing all the things I want to get done, while at the same time, I really don't like to be so structured all the time. I think it's important to have fun.
at rush hour.
It's like you've got to really, and it's also about managing your life so that your head's not so full and crazy, right? Like for me, part of my strategic thinking is simplifying my head. Like otherwise, if there's too much stuff, you don't really get anything done. You're moving in 5 different directions instead of getting one thing done really well.
I mean, from Yale and law school, was this always your strategy?
I did not think that Judge Judy Scheinlin would one day pick me to be on her new show.
So what did you think when you got that call?
That was incredible. I mean, so here's the truth. I actually got a call and they said, CBS is casting a new show. Can you come down this afternoon? And I was like, I gotta do my hair. I was like, I can't.
I don't know.
She was in
Get
problems.
my hair done. So I was like, give me a minute to because they're like, can you come down in the next couple hours? I was like, can you give me a minute? Just give me a minute. And so there were a few of us, and then we did kind of different combinations of people, and I made the cut. But I got to tell you, it is really something to be when we were kind of doing run-throughs. I remember being on the bench, and I saw Judy walk in, and she's kind of walking around, and she really is just a powerhouse. Her energy is so alive. Everything you're seeing on camera with her is real and sincere. People sometimes say, is she really nice? I'm like, yeah, if you don't show up lying. She's she's been a lovely mentor and guide to me in this business in all sorts of ways. But I have to say, that first moment when I realized I'm trying out for Judge Judy, that's when it kind of hit. I was like, wow. But yeah, it worked out. So
perfect time in history. And you're a perfect role model to carry the leadership of a women, and we're just proud of all your work.
Absolutely. I know you've always been an avid voice for women, for minorities. Tell us a little bit about the platform and how Hot Bench has helped you with this.
I think that TV is really special because it does kind of put you in a place where people will listen and they care about some of the stuff, that is important. And for me, the things that I talk about publicly are really just an outgrowth of things I've been doing for a long time. I've been on the board of Public Counsel, which is the largest provider of free legal services in the country for some time. I'm on the board of the Western Justice Center, which promotes alternative dispute resolution. I surprise some people when I tell them I'm also on the board of the Boy Scouts, the National Executive Board. Yes, I think that first off, I started with a council that in the Western LA County Council, which never discriminated on the basis of sexual orientation. And so then when the Scouts changed their national policy, and then now they're allowing girls to achieve the rank of Eagle, I think it's really important, frankly. You know, this whole conversation about girls in the Scouts, the girls have actually always been in the Scouts. The policy change that's getting so much attention now just allows the girls who've already been in Scouts to make the highest rank of Eagle.
Were you a Scout?
I was not. I got involved actually because this council, the Western LA County Council, which was sort of my introduction to the Scouts, they wanted some help sort of navigating some legal issues, and they're also kind of strategic position because the Western LA County Council was actually taking a position on membership and inclusion and sexual orientation that was far advanced than what was happening nationally. So they kind of wanted some help with like strategic direction and communication stuff. And I'm also their in-house, their pro bono lawyer.
Wow.
So there's organizations like that. Like I think that the Scouts are important because it really does sort of teach civics and values, and I'm telling you, and structure, and there is some good to that.
Survival
Like
skills.
athletes, athletic programs, and these are things that the kids need in our world because there isn't a lot of structure.
No, there's not. And I think the flip side of that, I've also had the chance to like work with kids, who haven't had that opportunity, right? Like I just gave the graduation speech at East River Academy, which is a school on Rikers Island in the jail. And to see these kids, incarcerated kids marching down in caps and gowns and crying, because they, some of them got high school equivalency degrees, like there were different, there were different exams that they had taken and passed. But really to have the chance to like work with kids and to work with people who to some extent, we've written off a lot of folks that shouldn't be written off. A lot of those kids who are eagerly learning. In Rikers, and remember, Rikers is a place where lots of folks are just because they can't make bail. They haven't necessarily been adjudicated guilty of anything. Some of them just can't make bail.
Wow.
So these kids are there learning, and I have to say, it reminded me that if there's any good I can do, if there is any, people watch the show, they like the show, and because of it, you've got me on your very fun show. If there's any good I can do, it's just I'd like for people to. We need to start being a little more compassionate. We've written off people who are on the. We've written off incarcerated people. We've written off entire communities of folks, and I really think it's a lack of compassion. Like we're. And again, I'm talking to myself too. It's something I want to remind myself of when I'm doing cases. Like justice is necessary, and we need justice and rules and structure, but we also need a little more compassion.
So what's the first step in that?
Honestly, for me, the first step is just to try to be nicer in the space that I am. Like, right, we can only control the space we occupy. Sometimes we get in trouble, I think, by trying to do too much or, take things too far. You can really make the biggest impact sometimes by just trying to touch who and what's around you. We forget sometimes, especially when we're busy, and if you live in a town like LA, it's easy to not be nice. I've had days where like somebody cuts you off, you just don't feel nice. I can't say I'm an LA native, and so I watch this traffic grow exponentially, leaps and bounds. There are times when I'm not so nice.
Right.
And I have to remind myself, You know, it's to me, I feel like I'm just a work in progress, right? Like I want to be better. I want to be nicer. I want to be more compassionate.
And be compassionate to yourself for
Indeed.
not being perfect in that. What do you do to really maintain that balance? I know you said, you get quiet, but is there something you do to really just look after yourself?
I try to do a number of things to look after myself. You know, I wish, especially here on this platform with you guys, I wish I could say I'm really diligent about meditating. I'm not.
Me neither.
I try. Like I try, but I'm not as regular as I should. I do like to work out. I think that there is a real healing that happens when you exert yourself physically. Like your head clears up. I don't do it first thing in the morning. I can't, like you guys with
We
these
only do it out of
early,
necessity.
yeah, that is.
Otherwise, we wouldn't get it done.
But it's true. Like if you got to get it out of the way. But it's hard for me. It's hard for me early. But I'm trying to make it earlier because it really does. It does pick you up. And for me, like my family and my friends, are really. I don't know how I would manage much, frankly, without the community of people that I have. Mm-hmm. I think it's easy, especially when you work in television and you're doing something that people are watching. You can really be racked by self-doubt and self-criticism. Like, just watch yourself on TV. Look at some of these bad wigs I've had sometimes. And it's like, back in the day when you're done, like, oh, did I wear that? Did I look that? Did I say that? And so when you're in a situation where you're constantly presented with yourself, it's easy to criticize. Like it's easy to become super critical. And that's actually something that I work on because at some point, as you said, you got to just live with your mistakes.
Get off your own hot bench.
Exactly. That's right.
Well, I do believe that it is an ethical and moral, spiritual world we live in, and that there are cause and effect that happen. But I do think that we all have to be more compassionate, especially right now in history, and starts with the self for sure. But if we could just do it for our community and let it spread out from there. So thank you so much for being a leader and representing for all of us in that realm. Where can people find you?
You can see us on CBS stations and Fox stations. We're in syndication. So in LA, we're on Channel 9 at 1 o'clock, I believe.
All right.
Isn't that horrible that it just took me that long to remember what
Everything's on demand anyway. It's so fun. And they can follow you personally on Instagram as well.
Yes, Instagram, Tanya Acker, Twitter, Tanya Acker, Facebook, also Tanya Acker.
All right.
A brand.
Congratulations on getting those handles.
Yes. Absolutely. Stay tuned. We'll be back for more. Good morning, La La Land.